It was exactly 6:02 a.m. when I pulled up in front of my parents' house in Asheville. The sky was still a deep shade of blue, the sun barely brushing the horizon, and the air had that crisp, almost sacred quiet of early morning. I had double-checked the weather, reprinted our boarding passes, and left the house 15 minutes early, just in case. This trip had been in the making for over 2 years, planned down to every last dinner reservation. Flights to Paris, luxury hotels in Florence, private walking tours in Rome. All of it mine. My treat. A once-in-a-lifetime experience I had poured my soul into. For them. I parked at the curb, smiled to myself, and got out to help with the luggage. That's when I saw her. My younger sister, Sienna, was standing at the door, pulling a sleek lavender suitcase behind her, dressed in athleisure like she was heading to a spa weekend. My mother was beside her, beaming. Too brightly. My heart skipped. I looked from one to the other, trying to keep my voice even. What's going on? Oh, Violet, my mom said, her tone like she was announcing a surprise birthday party. We decided Sienna's going instead of you. The words didn't land immediately. They floated in the morning air. Absurd and incomprehensible. Instead of me? I asked, blinking hard. Mom, this is my trip. She waved a hand like I had pointed out something mildly inconvenient. You're always working so hard. You can take another trip later. Your sister's been stressed. She needs this. My chest tightened. I turned to my dad, but he was looking away, pretending to check his watch. Sienna didn't even bother to fake shame. She smirked, one hand on her hip like this was some kind of power move. Thanks for understanding, sis, she said, her voice dripping with fake gratitude. The pressure behind my ribs was unbearable. I had paid for everything. Every tour, every hotel, every flight upgrade. I had imagined the way their faces would light up when we stood in front of the Eiffel Tower or floated down the Arno River in Florence. I had done it to make them happy, to finally feel like I mattered. And now they were replacing me with her. I should have screamed. I should have cried. I should have dropped the suitcase and walked away. But I didn't. I bit down on the bitterness, rising in my throat, and nodded. Let's get going then. My voice was flat. I turned toward the trunk, popped it open, and loaded in the luggage. Sienna tossed hers in last, humming something under her breath. My mother climbed into the back seat with a satisfied sigh, my father following quietly behind her. As I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, a strange calm washed over me. It wasn't peace. It was the numb, razor-thin calm right before a storm breaks. They thought they could cast me aside and still enjoy the luxury I worked so hard to create. Fine. Let's see how that works out. The car ride to the airport was a symphony of silence, punctuated only by Sienna's nonstop chatter. She leaned forward from the back seat, talking about her outfits, TikToks about Paris, and all the shopping she planned to do. Her voice grated like static, but my hand stayed steady on the wheel. Oh my gosh, Mom. Should I pack the blue dress or the floral one for the Eiffel Tower? She asked, giggling. My mother chuckled, lightly. Bring both, sweetheart. We'll have time to change between stops. They said it so casually. Like I wasn't even in the car. I clenched my jaw and focused on the road ahead. Asheville's early morning streets blurred into one another, but the weight in my chest stayed sharp, anchored to every word they said. At one point, my dad cleared his throat. Thanks again for driving us, Violet. I know this probably feels unusual. I met his eyes briefly in the rearview mirror. Unusual. That's an interesting way to put it. He looked away, lips pressed together, adjusting the seatbelt like it might save him from the discomfort. He didn't say another word. Sienna leaned forward, her perfume wafting toward me. Too sweet, too artificial. You're not mad, right? She cooed. I mean, this is huge for me. I've never been out of the country. I could never afford something like this on my own. You're being really mature about it. I forced a smile so tight it hurt. Of course. Enjoy the trip. She leaned back, satisfied with her own delusion. My fingers curled tighter around the steering wheel, the leather biting into my skin. Every mile felt like a countdown. Not to the flight, but to the moment I would finally let go of this farce. When we pulled up to the airport drop-off zone, I moved on autopilot. I parked, got out, opened the trunk, and began unloading bags. My mother stepped out first, stretching and adjusting her scarf. She walked over and gave me a brief hug, one of those polite, shallow ones you give to distant relatives at funerals. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart," she said. "This means a lot to us." "And to Sienna." I nodded stiffly. "Sure, Mom." Sienna wheeled her suitcase to the curb, beaming like she'd won some kind of prize. "You're the best, Vi. Seriously." I didn't answer. I watched them disappear into the terminal, swallowed by the sliding glass doors and the bustle of the airport lobby. The moment they were out of sight, I walked back to the car and got in, my hands trembling as I shut the door. This wasn't just about a trip. This was years of being the reliable one, the responsible one, the afterthought, the one they assumed would always understand, always adjust, always be okay with giving up. But something shifted that morning, and they wouldn't realize it until it was far too late. I didn't cry on the drive home. I thought I would. I thought the hurt would break through and flood me, but it didn't. Instead, there was this strange, hollow quiet in my chest, the kind that follows a storm. But before the rebuild, I parked in front of my house and sat there for a moment, engine off, hands still on the wheel, staring straight ahead. Then I exhaled, slowly, carefully, like I was releasing something I'd been holding for years. I stepped out of the car, walked inside, and closed the door behind me without turning on the lights. My home was still, dim, and waiting, just like it always did when I came back after giving a piece of myself away to people who never noticed. Not this time. I walked straight to the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and logged into the travel account I had used to book everything. The page loaded slowly. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, and then one by one I started canceling it all. The suite in Paris gone. The luxury room in Florence, with the river view, cancelled. The museum passes, the private driver in Rome, the restaurant reservations I'd paid deposits for months in advance. Every last one vanished with a click. The screen flashed with confirmation emails as I worked, each one like a breath of fresh air. I had memorized every detail of that trip. I knew exactly where they'd be trying to check in, and I knew exactly where they'd get turned away. I stared at the inbox filling up with refund notices, the totals tallying like a scorecard of my own quiet rebellion. They wanted her to go instead? Fine, but they wouldn't do it on my dime. I wasn't angry, not in the way I expected. I wasn't screaming or throwing things. I didn't need to. The truth was, I felt lighter than I had in years. It was almost terrifying how good it felt to choose myself. For once, to draw a line, not in the sand, but in stone. When I closed the laptop, I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and smiled, not wide, not triumphant, but deeply. Like I had finally stopped pretending that being the bigger person meant swallowing every insult. They thought I'd take the hit, like always. They had no idea what was coming. The calls started as soon as their flight landed in Paris. I was still in my pajamas, standing at the sink rinsing out my coffee mug, when my phone buzzed once, twice, then erupted into a flurry of vibration that didn't stop for nearly 10 minutes. At first, I ignored it. I walked over to the couch, sipped my coffee slowly, and let the storm build without interruption. Then curiosity got the better of me. I unlocked my phone. 10 missed calls. 5 from my mother. 2 from my dad. 3 from Sienna. A string of texts filled the screen, one after the next, like dominoes falling. "Violet, what's going on? The hotel says our reservation isn't showing up. Did you forget to confirm the booking? Call me now. This isn't funny, Violet. Fix this. Now." I actually laughed, sharp, breathy, unexpected. Fix this? They really thought I was still that version of me, the one who always patched things up, cleaned up their messes, smoothed over their lack of foresight and effort. The next message came with a voicemail. Sienna, of course. Her voice snapped through the speaker before I could hit delete. Violet, this is so petty. You're really going to leave us stranded? We're stuck here because of you. You need to call the hotel and fix this. Like now. I hit delete mid-sentence. I hadn't packed a single bag for this trip. And yet I had all the power. Another call. My mother this time. I let it ring, and ring, and ring, and then, for no other reason than to stop the buzzing, I picked up. Her voice hit me like a slap. Violet, what did you do? The hotel says the reservation was canceled. None of the tours are booked anymore. Why would you? I cut her off, calm as still water. I canceled them. Silence. On the other end, I could hear background noise, muffled voices, airport announcements, Sienna's indignant whining. My mother's voice returned, low and sharp. Why would you do that? I let the sarcasm drip. Oh, I don't know. Maybe because you took my trip and handed it to someone else like it was a spare jacket. Maybe because you decided, without even asking me, that I didn't matter. She tried to speak, but I kept going. You're lucky I even drove you to the airport. Her voice turned defensive. We thought you'd understand. Sienna needed this. I snapped. Understand what? That my time, my money, my effort means nothing? That as long as your precious Sienna gets what she wants, I'm just expected to smile and move out of the way. There was a long pause. For a moment, I thought I heard a flicker of guilt. But then came the hiss. We're family. We don't do this to each other. I laughed bitterly. Funny. I was just thinking the same thing. Then I hung up, just like that, and turned my phone off. The silence that followed was pure. Sacred, like stepping out of a burning building and closing the door behind you. Let them figure it out. I was done saving them. The silence didn't last forever, but it lasted long enough. Long enough for me to sit out on my back porch with a warm cup of tea, legs curled under a blanket, and watch the sun stretch across the trees like nothing in the world was broken. Long enough for me to sleep in without guilt, to cook breakfast without rushing, to feel like my life belonged to me again. For 2 whole days, I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder how their flight went. I didn't care what they were eating or where they were staying. For the first time in years, I wasn't tethered to their needs. It was strange how quiet my house was, but peaceful. That peace broke on the 3rd day when I opened my phone and saw over a dozen voicemails waiting. The first was from my mom, angry. Violet, you've gone too far. Your sister is in tears and your father is furious. We can't get into any of the hotels. Do you have any idea what you've done? The next was Sienna, entitled as ever. You're ruining everything. This is supposed to be our dream trip. You need to call and fix it, like now. And then came my dad. His voice was softer, but it still stung. Violet, I don't know what's going on with you, but this isn't like you. Please call us. We need to sort this out. Sort it out, like I was the one who created the mess. I placed the phone down on the table and wrapped my fingers around the ceramic mug, letting the heat sink into my skin. I didn't reply. I didn't even think about replying. That evening, Harper stopped by, unannounced as always, holding 2 coffees and a raised eyebrow. I heard, she said simply, setting the drinks down and plopping onto my couch like she lived there. Of course you did, I replied, managing a tired smile. She sipped her drink, then looked over at me, her voice quiet but firm. Your mom called me yesterday. Of course she had. My mother had always been good at recruiting allies when guilt didn't work. And what did you say? I asked, bracing myself. Harper shrugged. I told her you were probably busy, and that she should give you space. You know, like she failed to do for the past decade. I let out a laugh. for real this time. A sharp, breathy sound that cracked the heaviness in my chest. "You're the best." "No," she said, her tone softening. "You're the best, because you finally stood up for yourself." Her words stayed with me long after she left. They clung to the corners of my mind as I cleaned up the kitchen, folded laundry, watered the ferns on the porch. They echoed louder than any voicemail. You finally stood up for yourself. It wasn't rage that drove me anymore. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. They had made a choice. And now so had I. No more fixer. No more doormat. No more waiting to be included in a life I was expected to fund but never allowed to fully live. I didn't know what was next. But for the first time, I knew I would be the one to choose it. It took me less than an hour to decide. I hadn't planned to do anything drastic that evening. Maybe just watch something light, read a chapter or two. But then I passed by the small pile of papers on my desk, the neatly organized folder I'd created for the trip. I paused, then sat down, and opened the spreadsheet. There it was, everything I had built. The names of cities, the flight codes, the carefully stacked itinerary. Day 1 in Paris, Day 2 at the Louvre, Day 3 in Florence. But the names didn't sting anymore, because as I looked at those rows and columns, one thought kept rising up like a whisper I could no longer ignore. This was never about them. This was about me. I closed the spreadsheet, opened a new browser window, typed in solo travel ideas for women. 3 hours later, I had a new itinerary. No one else's preferences. No one to accommodate. Just me. I booked a one-way flight to Rome, then a train to Florence. A few days in Cinque Terre. I picked cozy boutique hotels and quiet little ghost houses. I left space in the schedule for rest, for curiosity, for spontaneity. Not because I was lazy, but because I could. 2 weeks later, I boarded the plane alone. I thought I'd be nervous, and I was at first. But the second my feet hit Italian soil, I felt a kind of calm I'd never known before. I wandered cobblestone streets with no destination. I drank espresso in hidden cafes where no one knew my name. I marveled at the ruins, the fountains, the faces around me that weren't expecting anything from me except to exist. One afternoon, I sat on the Spanish Steps, watching the crowd drift and swirl like ocean tides. I had a gelato in one hand and my journal in the other. The air smelled like sugar and stone. For years, my dreams had always been laced with obligation. Get the job. Make enough. Prove I was worth loving. And always include everyone else in the plan. But now, I opened to a clean page and wrote, learn Italian, start a business, travel to 5 more countries, stop apologizing for putting myself first. I underlined the last one 3 times. That night in Florence, I had dinner at a tiny family-run restaurant tucked between 2 bookshops. The candlelight flickered across the wine glass, and the Arno River shimmered in the distance. I didn't miss home. I didn't miss their voices or their guilt trips or their complaints. And for the first time, I didn't miss being needed, because I was enough. Right there, alone at that table, I felt it like a steady pulse. I was finally living my life, not performing it. When I returned home, my suitcase was heavier, not from souvenirs, but from clarity. From all the pieces of myself I had gathered and stitched back together in quiet hotel rooms, on early morning walks, in journals inked with freedom. I placed the bag by the door and looked around my house. It felt different, like it belonged to someone who finally knew how to say no. My phone buzzed just as I was unpacking. A message from Mom. Hope you had a nice trip. Maybe we can all talk soon. No guilt, no command, just a soft nudge. I stared at the screen, then set the phone face down on the table. Not yet. Later that week, another message. Then another. I ignored most of them. But when the phone rang one quiet Thursday afternoon and I saw her name again, I let my thumb hover and answered. "Hi, Violet," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in years. How was your trip? It was amazing, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I'm glad to hear that. She hesitated. We've been thinking a lot about what happened. Maybe we handled things poorly. Poorly. I almost laughed, but I didn't. I let the silence hang for a moment before replying. You replaced me on a trip I planned and paid for, without even asking. Poorly is an understatement. I know, she said quietly. Your dad and I, we didn't realize how much it would hurt you. I didn't respond right away. I didn't trust the calm in her voice. I'd been lured in by it before, guilt-wrapped apologies that led straight back into old habits. And Sienna? I asked. She's upset, Mom admitted, but I think she knows she could have handled things better too. I leaned against the counter. This wasn't just about the trip, Mom. It was everything before it. Every holiday shaped around Sienna's whims. Every time you asked me to give, well, she got to take. I'm not doing it anymore. There was a pause, then a sigh. We're going to try to do better, she said. We don't want to lose you. Her words tugged at something old in me. Something that used to leap at the chance for connection. But I had changed, and now I knew better. I'm glad to hear that, I said, calm but unmoved. But it's going to take more than words to fix this. I need to see real effort, not just apologies. You will, she promised quickly. We'll give you the space you need. But I hope you'll let us back in someday. After the call, I set the phone down and looked around my kitchen. Nothing had shifted. The sunlight was still warm on the tiles. My tea was still steaming. I still belonged to myself. Maybe they meant it. Maybe they didn't. But either way, it wasn't my job to fix them. Not anymore. The day they returned, I was already there. I didn't go to greet them out of kindness. I went for closure. I parked in their driveway, coffee in hand, and sat on the porch swing like it was my seat at a courtroom. Their taxi pulled in slowly, the trunk popping open with a weary groan. The three of them stepped out, dragging their suitcases behind them like the weight of disappointment had sunk into every wheel. Lauren, Sienna, was the first to speak. Well, I hope you're happy. I raised an eyebrow, stayed seated. Happy about what? Our trip was a disaster, my mom snapped, waving her hand dismissively like she was swatting at a fly. We spent the entire week staying in tiny hotels and eating. I don't even know what that food was. Don't get me started on the tours, Sienna added, folding her arms. Oh, wait, there weren't any. Do you know how humiliating it is to show up and be told there's no reservation? I took another sip of coffee and let the complaints wash over me like white noise. Sounds rough, I said flatly, but you wanted to take Sienna. I'm sure you all had some great bonding time. That's not the point, my mother said, her voice rising. You set us up to fail. I stood up slowly, setting my mug down beside me. No, Mom, I didn't set you up for anything. I planned a beautiful trip for the three of us, one I worked overtime for, saved for, planned every detail of. You're the ones who chose to cut me out at the last minute. My father finally spoke, his tone quiet but firm. You didn't have to cancel everything, Violet. That was extreme. Was it? I asked, folding my arms. Why should I have paid for a trip I wasn't invited to? If Sienna needed it so badly, maybe you should have planned one for her. Or better yet, she could have earned it herself. Sienna rolled her eyes. You're so dramatic. It's just money, Violet. I felt my chest tighten, but this time not with pain, with power. And you're so entitled, I shot back. Do you have any idea how much work went into planning that trip? How many nights I gave up rest? How many things I put off so I could make it perfect? But you don't, because for you everything just shows up, because someone else takes care of it. They stared at me, finally quiet. I've spent years being the responsible one, I continued, my voice calm but unshakable. The one who fixes things, who plans things, who makes sure everyone's taken care of, and all you've done is take it for granted. My mother opened her mouth to respond, but I raised a hand. No, Mom. What's not fair is how you treated me. You chose her, like always, and now I choose me. I picked up my bag from the porch swing, turned toward my car. I'm glad you're back safely, but don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I'm done. I walked to my car, keys in hand. I heard them calling after me. 3 voices laced with guilt, irritation, desperation, but I didn't look back. The engine roared to life as I pulled out of the driveway, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to cry. I felt free. The drive home from my parents' house felt different this time. No heaviness, no swirling thoughts trying to piece together what I could have said better, how I could have softened the blow. Just silence and peace. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the early evening light was filtering through the trees, casting golden shadows across my porch. I turned off the ignition and sat there for a moment, my hands resting calmly in my lap. They could be angry. They could be embarrassed. They could sit in that kitchen and tell each other how ungrateful I was. It didn't matter anymore. I walked inside and made myself a cup of tea, real tea, loose-leaf jasmine in a ceramic pot I had bought on a whim from a local artist. No instant powder, no rushing, no compromises. Then I sat on my couch, legs tucked beneath me, and let myself feel everything. All at once, the anger, the hurt, the relief, the aching disappointment of years wasted, and the strange exhilaration of finally standing up for the woman I'd buried under yes and okay and sure I'll handle it. My phone was still off. The silence wasn't lonely, it was luxurious. Over the next few days, I did things slowly, intentionally. I repainted my bedroom a soft shade of sage. Threw out the couch my parents had gifted me after they didn't want it anymore, and bought a new one that I actually liked. I rearranged my bookshelves, donated clothes I hadn't worn in years, and replaced the old dinnerware with pieces I picked out for myself. Little things, small shifts, but each one whispered the same message: you belong to you now. I joined a local hiking group. I started journaling every morning. 5 minutes, no filter. I tried a new cafe every Saturday, even if the coffee wasn't great, just to see what else was out there. And I didn't return their calls. Not yet. Not because I was punishing them, but because I was choosing my timing. Because for once, I was choosing something at all. One Sunday afternoon, I sat on my porch and watched the sun dip behind the ridge, casting fire across the sky. The wind was cool, soft. I held a pen in one hand, a notebook in the other, and stared at a blank page, not in fear but in anticipation. I didn't know what came next, but I knew it wouldn't be about earning their approval anymore. It would be about me, the woman who had spent years doing the right thing, the polite thing, the expected thing, was finally doing the real thing, living, and it felt damn good. It was late Tuesday morning when my phone rang again. I stared at the screen for a long second, then picked up. "Hi, Violet," my dad said, his voice lower than usual. "Your mom wanted me to call. She thinks you'll listen to me." I leaned back in my chair, not answering right away. He sighed. "Look, this has gotten out of hand. Your mom's upset. Lauren, Sienna, is furious. And, well, it's just a mess. But you're better than this." That was all it took. That line, that assumption that being better meant being quiet. I sat up straighter. Better than what, Dad? Better than standing up for myself? Better than refusing to be treated like a footnote in my own life? "That's not what I meant," he rushed to say. "It's just, you've always been the reasonable one, the one who holds everything together." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Exactly. That's the problem." He paused. I could hear him breathe, like he was searching for the words that might fix it all. But there weren't any. "You're punishing the whole family over one bad decision. Is that really fair?" "Fair," I repeated, my voice rising. "Let's talk about fair. Was it fair when you and Mom looked me in the eyes and told me the trip I'd spent years saving for was no longer mine? Was it fair when you replaced me with Sienna like I was an optional extra? That's not what we were trying to do. It's what you did, I said flatly. And now you want me to act like it didn't happen. There was silence on the other end. I don't know what you want me to say, he finally whispered. I don't need you to say anything, I replied. I just need you to understand. I'm done being the afterthought. From now on, I come first. Then I ended the call, and this time there was no shaking in my hands, no tightness in my chest, just calm, real, earned calm. Later that evening, I sat on the porch again. A soft breeze rustled the wind chimes, and the sky was painted in gold. I opened my journal and flipped to a new page. Across the top I wrote what I know now, and underneath it I started listing. I am not responsible for keeping the peace. I am not selfish for choosing myself. I am not dramatic for asking to be valued. I am not afraid of being alone. I am no longer willing to be erased to make someone else feel more important. The list went on. It was quiet, simple, true. A week later, Harper called again. So, she asked, what's next for you? I smiled, watching the sun slip below the mountains. I don't know, I said, but for the first time in my life, I get to decide. And that felt like the real trip of a lifetime.
The world keeps turning, and with each turn comes a new story. When one door closes, another opens, leading us into a journey entirely different. Let us set aside the echoes of the tale just past and step together into a new realm where another destiny awaits to be told. And now I invite you to listen to the second story, a path of its own, unrelated to what came before, yet filled with mysteries and surprises meant only for those willing to journey onward with me.
It was already 10 at night, and once again, Eric hadn't come home. I stared at the clock on the wall and listened to the silence of our Portland house, feeling the weight of every passing minute. I wasn't alone. My best friend Sophie Bennett was with me, sitting at the kitchen table with her glass of tea. Sophie and I had been inseparable since high school, and she had been listening patiently as I tried to make sense of Eric's constant late nights. Is he always this late now? She asked, raising an eyebrow. I sighed. Lately, yes. He says the garage is busier than ever. According to him, there's too much work, not enough hands. But I don't know Sophie. It didn't used to be like this. He used to at least have Sundays off, or we'd go out once in a while. Now it's nothing. No weekends, no holidays. Just late nights and excuses. Sophie tilted her head. And you believe that? That it's all just work? I hesitated. I want to. But sometimes I wonder if there's someone else. I mean, he comes home looking exhausted, clothes smelling of oil, like he's been at the shop all day. It doesn't look like he's coming from a date. But what if I'm wrong? The thought made my chest tighten. Anna, Sophie leaned closer, her voice calm but firm. Don't tell me you haven't thought about it. Men don't just disappear like that unless there's a reason. Either it's another woman, or it's something else he doesn't want you to know. I hated how her words echoed the very suspicion I'd been pushing away. I had already considered it many times, but I hadn't found any real proof. And the worst part was that Eric and I hadn't been intimate for over a month. Every time he came home, he would collapse into bed, muttering that he was too tired. I've told him I want us to have a baby, I admitted softly, staring at my hands. We've been married 5 years now. I don't want to wait forever. But how am I supposed to have a child with a man I barely see? Sophie frowned. You've been married 5 years, and he still hasn't introduced you to his family either, right? I shook my head. No, he has a mother and a brother, but they live in another city. According to him, things are complicated. He told me once that they stopped speaking after he won some money in the lottery years ago. He used it to open the garage, and they resented him for not handing the money over to his mother. Since then, nothing. Not even at our wedding. Only 2 of his co-workers showed up. His own brother didn't. Sophie whistled softly. That's not just complicated, Anna. That's unusual. Before I could reply, I heard the front door open. The smell of alcohol filled the hallway. Eric walked in, shoulders slouched, eyes slightly glassy. My stomach sank. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Why so late? He waved his hand, dismissing me. A friend from work went missing. I got worried, so I had a few drinks. I blinked. Missing? Did you call the police? They won't do anything yet, he muttered. He's an adult. Probably just went off somewhere. I glanced at Sophie, who sat rigid in her chair. Her eyes were sharp, ready to jump in if Eric said the wrong thing. Eric, you can't just barge in like this every night. I pressed, my patience thinning. He turned on me, his face darkening. Can you stop? You nag every time I walk through the door. Maybe try acting like a wife for once, instead of tearing me down. He stepped closer, and for the first time, I truly worried he might raise a hand against me. My breath caught in my throat. Back off! Sophie snapped from behind me. If you even think about touching her, you'll regret it. Don't forget, I've got a black belt. Eric glared at her, his jaw tight, but after a tense pause, he stomped off toward the shower without another word. I sat frozen, my heart pounding in my ears. Sophie reached over and squeezed my hand gently. That night, long after Sophie left, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in our marriage, I realized I was afraid of my own husband. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Eric had gone silent after his shower, slipping into bed without a word. His back was turned to me, his breathing steady but heavy, as if the world weighed on him. I couldn't close my eyes. My thoughts spun in endless circles, dragging me deeper into doubt. When I finally drifted off just before dawn, I had a dream. My father was there, my dad, who had passed away years ago. He stood on the porch of the house I grew up in, looking at me with that familiar mix of love and concern. His lips were moving, but I couldn't hear a word. It was as if the sound was muffled, lost to the wind. I woke up with my heart racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was a warning. My father had never once appeared in my dreams without a reason. Every time he did, something significant followed. I got up, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, trying to push away the unease. But by mid-morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know where Eric really was spending all his time. On impulse, I grabbed my keys and drove to the garage. The winter air in Portland bit at my cheeks as I stepped out of the car. When I pulled into the lot, I noticed something strange right away. For a place that was supposedly swamped with work, the lot was almost empty. Only 2 cars sat in the parking area. My stomach twisted. Inside, the garage smelled of oil and metal, the usual stench of hard labor. I saw Igor, one of Eric's mechanics, working on a single car. He looked up when I walked in, startled. "Morning, Mrs. Whitmore," he said cautiously, wiping his hands on a rag. "Hey, Igor, is Eric around?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He hesitated, then shrugged. "He was here earlier, I think. Haven't seen him in a while." "All right, thanks," I said quickly, forcing a smile. My pulse hammered as I walked toward Eric's office. The door was closed, but I could hear his voice through the thin walls. I froze just outside, my breath caught in my throat. "I told you, I can't today." Eric's voice was low urgent. "My wife is starting to get suspicious. If she pushes, she might try to find out more. We'll have to move it to Monday. That's final." I pressed my palm against the wall, trying to steady myself. The silence on the other end stretched long enough for me to imagine him nodding, listening carefully. "No," he said firmly after a pause. "That won't work. Not now. Monday. I'll call you then." There was a click, and I knew he'd ended the call. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. Who was he talking to? What was so important it had to be rescheduled? And why was he afraid of me finding out? I forced myself to take a deep breath, smoothed down my hair, and knocked lightly before pushing the door open. Eric startled, nearly dropping the folder in his hands. His eyes widened as if he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. "Anna," he said slowly, "what are you doing here?" "I was just nearby and thought I'd stop in," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "I wanted to apologize for last night. I didn't mean to nag. You work hard, and I know I don't always make it easy." His gaze narrowed. "What's the catch?" "No catch," I said, forcing a soft smile. For a moment, he studied me, suspicion in his eyes. Then, unexpectedly, he relaxed. "Fine. You're right. I've been working too hard. Maybe tonight I'll come home earlier. Around 6. We'll have dinner together. Just the two of us." I nodded, though my chest felt tight. Part of me wanted to believe him, to welcome this sudden tenderness. But the words I had overheard still echoed in my mind. He wasn't just staying late for work. Something else was happening, something he desperately wanted me not to discover. And that made me more uneasy than ever. That weekend, Eric stayed home. On the surface, it looked like everything was normal. He tinkered with small chores around the house, watched television, even helped me clear some snow off the front steps. To anyone else, he would have seemed like an ordinary husband catching a quiet weekend at home. But to me, the silence was deafening. He avoided long conversations, and whenever I tried to draw him into something deeper, he brushed it off with vague replies. On Saturday evening, while we were having dinner, I decided to take a risk. I had been thinking about his family, his mother and brother he'd never introduced me to, and I wondered if maybe talking about them would open a window into the man I married. "Eric," I said gently, trying to sound casual, "have you heard from your family lately? I mean, it's been 5 years and I still haven't met them. Maybe we could invite them for our anniversary, or even visit them." He set his fork down with a sharp clink, his jaw tightening. "We've talked about this before, Anna. I don't want to revisit it. But don't you think it's strange?" I pressed. "I mean, they're your mother and your brother. I've never even spoken to them on the phone. Don't you think I should at least know them?" His eyes flashed with anger. "It's none of your business. My family is my problem. You don't need to get involved." The harshness of his tone made me shrink back. He had never yelled at me like that before. For a long moment, we just sat there, the tension so thick I could feel it pressing down on my chest. Then he stood up abruptly, muttering something about being tired, and left the table. I sat alone in the quiet kitchen, staring at my untouched plate. His reaction didn't just hurt, it terrified me. Why was the subject of his family such a trigger? What was he hiding that was so explosive it couldn't even be discussed? The next morning, Sophie called to check in. She always seemed to know when I needed her. I told her everything. How he had snapped at me, how he avoided the subject like it was poison. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Sophie finally spoke. "Anna, this isn't just about family drama. He's hiding something, and it's big enough to scare him. If you keep pretending everything's fine, you'll never know the truth. You need to find out where he goes and who he's with." "You mean follow him?" I asked, my stomach tightening at the thought. "Yes," Sophie said firmly. "I know it feels wrong, but what's worse, living in ignorance while he pulls you deeper into whatever this is or finally knowing the truth?" I pressed my hand to my forehead, pacing the kitchen. "It feels humiliating, Sophie. Like I don't trust him. Like I'm sneaking around." She didn't let up. "What's more humiliating? Following him, or waking up one day to realize he's been lying to you for years? You already said you're scared of him sometimes. That's not normal. You need answers." Her words sank deep, and I felt a cold wave wash over me. She was right. As much as I wanted to believe in the man I thought I had married, the truth was slipping through my fingers. "All right," I whispered finally. "If this is the only way, I'll do it. Monday, I'll follow him." Sophie's voice softened. "You won't be alone. I'll be with you every step of the way. When I hung up, I stood in the quiet kitchen, staring out the window at the snow drifting down onto the street. My reflection in the glass looked back at me, pale and tense. I felt like I had just agreed to step into a dangerous game, one I never wanted to play, but one I could no longer avoid. Monday came faster than I expected. My nerves were shot from the moment I woke up. I couldn't concentrate on work, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except what Sophie and I had planned. By late afternoon, I changed into dark jeans, a hoodie, and pulled a baseball cap low over my face. When Sophie pulled up outside my house, she laughed softly when she saw me. "You look like you're about to rob a bank," she teased. I forced a smile. "I feel like it." We parked a block away from the garage, hiding Sophie's car behind a cluster of trees near a side street. From where we stood, we had a partial view of the entrance. The winter air cut straight through my jacket, but I barely noticed. My pulse was hammering in my ears. For the first half hour, nothing happened. Mechanics came and went. A few customers pulled up, but nothing out of the ordinary. Then, just as I was beginning to think we were wasting our time, a black SUV rolled into the lot. It wasn't the kind of car that usually stopped here. Too polished, too expensive, too out of place. Sophie nudged me. "That's it. That's who he's waiting for." The doors opened. A woman stepped out first, well-dressed mid-40s, hair pulled into a sleek bun, her presence commanding. She looked nothing like the kind of customer who would walk into a Portland auto repair shop. A younger man followed her out, maybe 30, tall and quiet, his eyes scanning the area like he was on guard duty. I gripped Sophie's arm, whispering, "Who are they?" "Not random customers," she whispered back. "That's for sure." We watched as the two of them headed straight into Eric's office without speaking to anyone in the shop. No car inspection, no paperwork, just straight to him. My stomach dropped. Sophie turned to me. "Stay here. I'm going in." "What?" "No, Sophie, relax. I'll pretend my car's making a noise, and I need Eric to take a look. It's the perfect cover. Trust me." Eric had never actually met Sophie in person, only heard her name in passing when I mentioned her. That, plus the fact she wore large sunglasses and a hood, gave her just enough anonymity. Before I could stop her, she slipped away, started her car, and pulled into the lot. I stayed hidden, watching through the trees as she parked near the garage entrance. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. She walked confidently inside while I paced behind the bushes, my fingers freezing in the cold. The minutes crawled by. I imagined a dozen scenarios. Eric catching her, the woman recognizing the act, Sophie being thrown out. Just when I thought I couldn't take the waiting anymore, Sophie reappeared. She was walking quickly back to her car, her face pale, but her eyes sharp. I hurried to meet her in the side street, breath clouding in the air. "Well, what happened?" She closed the car door behind us and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. "Anna, this isn't about another woman. It's worse." My throat went dry. "Tell me." "They were talking about cars," she said, her voice low. "Stolen cars. Eric told that woman he only managed to change the VIN numbers on 2 of them when she demanded 5 by yesterday. He was nervous, scared. She was tearing into him, threatening him. He's not the one in control here, Anna, she is. And he's terrified of her." I felt my stomach twist violently. I had prepared myself to hear about an affair, maybe another family hidden away somewhere, but this crime, stolen cars, criminal networks, it was more than I could process. "He's mixed up in something dangerous," Sophie added, meeting my eyes. "And he's been hiding it from you all this time." I pressed my hands to my face, my chest tightening as panic rose inside me. An affair would have been painful, humiliating, but at least it was familiar, something I could understand. This was different. This was darker. In that moment, I realized I didn't just feel betrayed. I felt unsafe. After what Sophie had told me, my head was spinning. I couldn't bear to go straight home. Instead, I parked my car near the waterfront park in Portland, the one I always went to when I needed to clear my mind. The icy wind bit at my cheeks as I walked along the path, circling the pond. Ducks paddled lazily near the thin sheets of ice forming at the edges, and the bare trees stretched their branches against a pale gray sky. I wrapped my coat tighter, trying to process what I'd learned. Eric wasn't cheating, at least not in the way I feared. But what Sophie overheard was far worse. Stolen cars, changing VIN numbers, a woman who terrified him. What kind of life had I been living? Thinking I knew my husband. I sat down on a bench, my hands trembling inside my gloves. That was when I heard a familiar voice. Anna? Anna Whitmore? Is that really you? I turned, startled, and saw a man in a tailored coat and polished shoes. He slipped off his sunglasses and I froze. It was Michael Donovan. My heart skipped a beat. Michael? I whispered, hardly believing it. He smiled, warm and genuine, just like he had in high school. I knew it was you. You look different, but still the same. Memories rushed back. Late nights studying together, stolen kisses before football games, the way he used to hold my hand like he'd never let go. We had been inseparable until his family moved away during senior year. I thought I'd never see him again. I can't believe this, I said, standing slowly. It's been, 15 years? Closer to 16, he said with a soft laugh. I moved back recently. Been setting up some new ventures here. I run a few boutique hotels now. Nothing too flashy, but it keeps me busy. I blinked at him. He looked every bit the successful businessman, confident, grounded, accomplished. And still, behind it all, I saw the boy who had once been my first love. We walked side by side along the path, catching up. He told me he'd never married, that he'd poured himself into his career instead. When he asked about me, my throat tightened. I told him I was married, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. Michael glanced at my wedding ring, then back at me. He didn't say anything, but there was something in his eyes, something that made my chest ache. I remembered hearing from someone that Michael had moved back to Portland last year, but never thought I'd run into him like this. Maybe fate had its own sense of timing. As we reached a small cafe near the park's edge, he asked if I had time for coffee. Against my better judgment, I said yes. We sat by the window, the warmth of the place wrapping around us, and for the first time in months I felt seen. Michael listened intently, asked about my work, my dreams, even my childhood. He laughed at my stories, remembered details I had forgotten. With Eric, conversations had turned into silence. With Michael, it felt effortless, like slipping back into a rhythm I didn't realize I'd missed so much. And yet, every time he smiled at me, guilt pricked at my conscience. I was still Eric's wife, no matter what lies he was hiding. But sitting there across from Michael, basking in the kind of attention and care I hadn't felt in years, I couldn't help but wonder what my life might have been if he had never left. When we finally stood to leave, he touched my arm gently, his fingers warm even through my coat. "Let's not let another 16 years pass before we talk again," he said softly. I nodded, my heart caught between longing and loyalty. As I walked away, I knew my world had just become even more complicated. 2 days later, Sophie called me out of the blue. Her tone was serious, sharper than usual. "Anna, I found something. You'd better sit down." I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, my palms damp. "What is it?" "You're not going to like this," she warned. I asked a friend of mine in the Portland Police Department to run a background check. Eric's name came up more than once. I gripped the edge of the table. "What do you mean, more than once?" "Anna, Eric was married before, and he has a daughter. She's 9 years old." Her words hit me like a blow to the chest. I couldn't breathe. "No, that's impossible. He told me he'd never been married. He said we'd build everything together. I'm telling you what the records show. He divorced about a decade ago, and his ex-wife remarried, moved out of state. But the girl, she's his daughter. There's no mistake." My vision blurred. 5 years, I had lived with this man, shared a home, shared a bed. dreamed of having children with him. And all that time, he had a child he never even mentioned. That's not all, Sophie continued. His name shows up in multiple investigations over the years, always around stolen vehicles. Not charged, not arrested, but listed as a witness or someone close to the scene. Too many times for it to be coincidence. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. My entire body felt cold. So all this time he's been lying to me. About his family. About his past. About everything. I wish I could tell you otherwise, Sophie said softly. But Anna, this isn't just about lies. He's dangerous. You need to think about your safety. I nodded numbly, though she couldn't see me. After we hung up, I sat in silence for what felt like hours. The man I thought I loved, the man I believed I knew, was a stranger. That evening, I met Michael again at the cafe near the park. When I walked in, he stood to greet me, pulling out my chair like it was the most natural thing in the world. The warmth in his eyes almost broke me. You look pale, he said gently. Rough day. I laughed bitterly. Rough life, apparently. Michael. Eric was married before. He has a daughter, 9 years old, and he never told me. Michael's expression hardened, but his voice stayed calm. That's a heavy secret to keep from your wife. What else has he been hiding? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Sophie found out his name is connected to stolen car cases. He always shows up, but only as a witness. It's too much to be coincidence. He's involved, Michael. I just don't know how deep. Michael reached across the table, his hand covering mine. His touch was steady, grounding me. Anna, you need to get out of this before it destroys you. You can't live with someone who hides entire pieces of his life from you. And if he's tied up in crime, that puts you in danger, too. Tears stung my eyes. I don't even know who I married. 5 years. I thought I was building a future with him. And now it feels like the floor just gave way beneath me. You don't have to face this alone, he said firmly. I'm here. Whatever happens, I'll help you through it. I stared into his eyes, and for the first time in days I felt a sliver of safety. The storm was far from over, but at least I wasn't standing in it alone. It was a Thursday night when Eric called to tell me he wouldn't be home. His tone was clipped, rushed, as if even speaking to me was an inconvenience. Got too much work at the shop. Don't wait up, he said before hanging up. I stood in the kitchen, holding the phone long after the line went dead. My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't sadness. It was anger, exhaustion, the realization that I couldn't spend another night staring at the walls, wondering what lies Eric was weaving in my absence. Almost without thinking, I picked up my phone and called Michael. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. Anna, are you free tonight? My voice trembled, but not from fear. From something I hadn't felt in years. Desire, anticipation, the need to be wanted. Always, he said softly. Come to the hotel. I'll be waiting. An hour later, I stepped out of a cab in front of his boutique hotel. Michael was already outside, holding a bouquet of lilies, my favorite. My throat tightened at the simple thoughtfulness of it. Eric had never once brought me flowers without a holiday dictating it. You look beautiful, Michael said, his eyes warm. He took my bag, paid the driver, and offered me his arm like a gentleman. When we walked into his suite, a bottle of champagne sat chilling in a silver bucket, glasses already set out. The lights were dim, soft music playing in the background. He moved with a kind of effortless grace, pulling out a chair for me, pouring the champagne, making me feel seen in every gesture. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. My hand shook slightly as I clinked mine against his. The first sip burned sweetly down my throat, loosening something tight inside me. That night, in Michael's arms, I felt alive again. He kissed me slowly, reverently, as if I were something precious. There was no rush, no impatience, no sense of obligation. Just tenderness, passion, love, the kind I had nearly forgotten existed. For hours, The weight I had carried for years fell away, and I remembered who I was before Eric's lies and shadows consumed me. Afterward, we lay tangled in the sheets, the city lights flickering faintly through the curtains. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "You can't keep living like this," Michael whispered, running his fingers through my hair. "You need to step away from him, at least for now. Tell him you have to leave for family reasons. Buy yourself time to figure this out." I closed my eyes. I don't even have family to run to. My parents had both passed away years ago. I was an only child, and whatever extended family I had, we'd long lost touch. "Then invent one," he said gently. "Say a relative is sick, and you have to go care for them. He'll believe it. And if he doesn't fight it, if he lets you go, that tells you everything you need to know." His words sank deep. He was right. I needed distance, a way out, even temporarily. The next morning, I drove home, my body still humming with memories of the night before. When Eric finally came back that evening, I told him I needed to leave town for a while. "A cousin called," I said, forcing my voice to tremble. "She's sick, and I'm the only one who can help." For a moment, I thought he would argue, but instead, he exhaled slowly, almost in relief. "If you need to go, then go," he said, avoiding my eyes. The ease with which he accepted my absence struck me harder than any confession could have. He wasn't worried about me leaving, he was relieved. And in that moment, I knew. Whatever he was involved in, he wanted me out of the way. Sophie returned from Eric's hometown on a Saturday evening. She came straight to Michael's hotel suite, her face pale but resolute. I could tell before she even opened her mouth that what she had uncovered was serious. "Anna," she said, lowering her voice as she shut the door behind her, "I talked to people there. Neighbors, old friends, anyone who still remembered the Whitmores. Your husband wasn't lying about cutting ties, but it's not just bad blood. His mother and his brother are both fugitives. They've been wanted for years in connection with stolen vehicles, organized crime. The family's been under suspicion for a long time. And Eric, he left, but he didn't leave clean. He's still tied up in it." My knees went weak. Michael pulled out a chair for me, and I sank into it, gripping the table. "So it's true. He's not just keeping secrets, he's still part of it." Sophie nodded grimly. "He didn't want you to know because once you did, you'd see him for what he is." Michael leaned forward, his eyes steady on mine. "We can't let this drag on. If you keep waiting, he'll either drag you down with him or do something worse. You need to confront him, Anna, but not alone." We sat together for hours, going over the details, crafting a plan. Sophie had managed to record some of her conversations in Eric's hometown, and Michael had discreetly connected with people who could pass information to the police if needed. It was risky, but it was the only way forward. On Sunday night, I called Eric. My hands shook as I held the phone. Michael had discreetly booked a second suite under my name, far from the one he normally stayed in. The hotel was one of his own, but he assured me Eric wouldn't recognize it. He'd never been there, and the name didn't give anything away. We chose Suite 312 because it was close to the emergency stairwell and had a secondary connecting door, just in case. "Eric," I said, forcing my voice steady, "we need to talk. Tonight. Meet me at the Northern Hotel. Suite 312. He hesitated. "Why there?" "Because it's private," I replied flatly. "And because it's important." After a long pause, he agreed. Half an hour. When he arrived, I was sitting on the edge of the couch, my palms damp against my knees. Michael and Sophie waited quietly in the adjoining room, hidden but close. My heart hammered as Eric walked in. He shut the door behind him and fixed his eyes on me. "All right, what's this about?" I stood, trying to steady my voice. "It's about the lies, about your family, about what you've been doing behind my back." His brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," I snapped, my voice rising. "I know your mother and brother are fugitives. I know you've been working with stolen cars. And I know you've been hiding all of it from me for 5 years. For a moment, he froze, his face a mask of shock. Then the mask cracked and rage poured through. "Who told you that?" he demanded, his voice dark, dangerous. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that I know. And I can't live like this anymore." His eyes narrowed to slits. He took a step closer. "You think you can just walk away from me? You think you can expose me and survive it? I could kill you right here, Anna. One push out that window, and everyone would believe it was an accident." Fear surged through me, but I didn't move. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "If you touch me, you'll regret it. People already know. Sophie knows. Michael knows. And the police are just one call away." At that moment, Michael stepped out from the adjoining room, his presence calm but firm. Sophie followed, holding up her phone. "We've got everything recorded, Eric. Your threats, your lies. It's over." Eric's face drained of color. He looked from me to Michael to Sophie, his chest heaving as the reality sank in. He tried to bluster, to sneer, but the fight was gone from his eyes. Slowly, he lowered himself onto the couch, muttering curses under his breath. Michael called the police. Within 20 minutes, officers arrived, and Eric was taken into custody. Sophie had already turned over her recordings and background notes to her friend at the Portland Police Department. Tonight's confrontation was the final piece they needed. I stood by the window, my hands trembling, watching the blue lights flash against the snow outside. 5 years of marriage had ended in handcuffs and betrayal. My heart ached, but beneath the pain there was relief. The truth was out. The danger was over. For the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe. When the police car finally pulled away, I stood frozen by the window, staring at the swirl of red and blue lights fading into the Portland night. My hands were trembling, and I couldn't tell if it was from fear, grief, or the sudden release of everything I had been carrying for 5 long years. The man I had married, the man I had once believed in, was gone, not because he left, but because the mask had finally been torn away. Michael came up beside me, placing his hand gently on my shoulder. "It's over, Anna," he said softly. "You don't have to carry him anymore." His words struck deep. I turned to face him, my vision blurred with tears. 5 years, Michael. 5 years, and I didn't even know who I was married to. I feel like my whole life's been a lie. Sophie's voice came from the couch behind us, firm but comforting. "It's not your fault. He fooled you, Anna. He fooled everyone. You trusted him because you're the kind of person who believes in people. That's not weakness, that's strength. But now you know and you're free." I let out a shaky laugh, wiping at my cheeks. Free. It doesn't feel like freedom yet. More like standing at the edge of a cliff, trying to decide whether to jump. "Then don't look down," Sophie said. "Look ahead." Michael guided me toward the balcony, and together we stepped out into the crisp night air. The city stretched beneath us, lights glowing against the dark Pacific horizon. Above, the stars pierced through the cold Oregon sky, sharp and clear. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering, and Michael draped his coat over my shoulders without a word. For a moment, we just stood there in silence. The chaos of the evening, the years of doubt and fear, all seemed to drift away with the winter wind. Finally, I spoke. "I don't know what comes next. I don't even know who I am without him." Michael turned toward me, his expression steady, grounded. "You're Anna Whitmore. You're stronger than you think. And you don't have to figure it all out tonight. You've got time. And you've got people who care about you." His eyes softened. "You've got me." The tenderness in his voice broke something open in me. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope, not built on lies, but on truth. Behind us, Sophie leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, her voice dry but warm. "Well, I'd say you've had enough drama for one lifetime. Maybe try a little peace and honesty for a change. It looks good on you." I smiled through my tears. Leave it to Sophie to cut through the heaviness with her blunt honesty. As the three of us stood there, me, Sophie, and Michael, I realized the truth I had been running from all along. My marriage had ended long before the police came for Eric. What ended tonight was not love, but the illusion of it. And standing here now, I knew I had a choice. I could cling to the wreckage of a broken past, or I could step into the future with open eyes, no longer afraid of the truth. I reached for Michael's hand, intertwining my fingers with his. The night was cold, but in that moment I felt warm, safe, seen, and ready to begin again. For the first time in years, I chose myself. And with that choice, I chose a new life, one built not on shadows, but on love that was real.